At 6 in the evening, Sonny Miller prepared a meal of 6 dishes and a soup, all tailored to Candy Prescott's tastes. By 7, he had drawn her bath, arranging her favorite roses and aromatherapy oils beside the tub. At 8, he placed her slippers by the front door, ready for her arrival. At 9 o'clock, the front door swung open. Candy had arrived. Sonny went to greet her, taking her coat with one hand while setting the slippers down before her with the other. After hanging her coat in the hall closet, he asked if she preferred to bathe first or eat. Still scrolling through her phone, she answered casually, "I'll bathe first." The hour hand on the wall clock had made half a rotation by the time Candy emerged from the bathroom in a robe, toweling her hair dry. Sonny was right there to hand her a set of pajamas. While she changed, he went to the kitchen to bring out the freshly warmed dinner. Candy had long grown accustomed to his meticulous care. She seemed to be in a good mood tonight, her eyes glued to her phone as if deep in conversation with someone. As he passed by her to set the table, he caught a glimpse of her illuminated phone screen. The name at the top of the chat interface, Ethan, jumped out at him. He calmly averted his eyes and turned back toward the kitchen, just as the phone in his own pocket began to ring. Sonny pulled out his phone. The screen read Mrs. Prescott. The moment he answered, her voice came through the line. "Sonny, are you really going to divorce Candy?" Sonny gazed out the window, where a cluster of night-blooming cereus was quietly unfurling under the glow of a wall sconce. After a long pause, he finally spoke softly. "Mrs. Prescott, you know as well as I do that I was only with her because of the contract. The contract is up now. Besides, Ethan is divorced and back in the country. She's been so happy lately. She doesn't need me anymore." On the other end of the line, Mrs. Prescott sighed, her voice filled with regret. "You've had to endure so much these past few years. I know how difficult it's been. I had hoped that after all this time, your devotion would win her over, but, well, never mind. With Ethan back, I don't have to worry about her anymore. You gave up your scholarship to study abroad for Candy 5 years ago. If you still want to go, I can make the arrangements for you." Sonny stared at the fully bloomed flower, his gaze momentarily distant. For 5 years, his life had been on hold for Candy. It was time to move forward. He nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Prescott. Please, make the arrangements. I'd like to leave as soon as possible." After he hung up, the flower outside the window quietly wilted, a perfect metaphor for the end of his 5-year marriage. He had come from a poor family, and it was a scholarship from the Prescott Group that had allowed him to finish his education. Thanks to their support, he had excelled in his studies and even secured the university's single, highly coveted spot in a study abroad program. Before he was set to leave the country, he had made a special trip to the Prescott estate to express his gratitude in person. The Prescott Group sponsored many students, but he was the first to ever show up to thank them personally. This prompted Mrs. Prescott, who had planned to offer a few polite words and send him on his way, to give him a second look. After hearing him out, she fell silent for a long moment before she spoke. "If you truly wish to repay our family's kindness, there's a way you can help me." For Mrs. Prescott, Sonny learned the story of Candy and Ethan Vance. Candy was the Prescott family's golden girl, and Ethan was the golden boy of another prominent family. Born into wealth, they had been childhood sweethearts who grew up side by side. Everyone could see that Candy was in love with Ethan, but he had once mentioned wanting a love that developed slowly and naturally, so she had always waited patiently. Finally, after they graduated from college, Candy felt the time was right to confess her feelings. But just then, Ethan suddenly started dating someone else and left the country with her. In disbelief, she raced to the airport that night, only to get into a car accident on the way. By the time she woke up from surgery, she learned that Ethan had already eloped with his new girlfriend abroad. From then on, she became a recluse, drinking day and night, the once vibrant golden girl a shadow of her former self. Sonny's visit had been perfectly timed. Mrs. Prescott decided he would be the one to help her daughter move on. And so, to fulfill his obligation, Sonny gave up his opportunity to study abroad and signed a 5-year contract with Mrs. Prescott. At a gala, he arranged a chance encounter with Candy, pretending to be smitten at first sight and beginning a relentless pursuit. Soon, their entire social circle was buzzing about the man who was madly in love with Candy Prescott. Candy gradually grew accustomed to his devotion, but always kept him at arm's length. That changed one night on a yacht party with her friends. They made a bet. Whichever of their dates could jump into the ocean and retrieve a ring they tossed overboard would win their friend the deed to the Northwood property. Sunny knew how badly she wanted that property. She had lost several nights of sleep over the deal. While the other men hesitated, intimidated by the churning waves, he dove into the dark water without a second thought. It was the first time Candy had ever lost her composure over him. She clung to him after he was pulled from the water, her voice trembling with fear. "Sunny Miller, let's get married. I'll try to love you." But Sunny would later learn the real reason she had agreed to marry him that night. Ethan had just posted a photo on Facebook of himself and his new wife sharing a passionate kiss under the northern lights. Even so, to fulfill his contract and help her move on from Ethan, he continued to treat her with unwavering devotion. He cooked for her and managed the household diligently. When he learned her childhood birthday wish had been to see a meteor shower, a wish her busy parents never fulfilled, he spent 6 months scouting the perfect mountain peak for stargazing. He waited there all night for her, but Candy never came. He found out later that she had gone to see Ethan instead. Ethan's marriage was beginning to show cracks around that time. From that day forward, she began flying out of the country every week, leaving all sorts of unique and thoughtful gifts on Ethan's doorstep to cheer him up, always making sure he never knew it was her. On the day Ethan returned to the country, she had been speeding to the airport to be the first to see him and crashed her car. Sunny sat by her hospital bed for 3 sleepless days and nights. While she lay in a coma, she called out Ethan's name 999 times. In that moment, Sunny finally understood that he could never complete the task Mrs. Prescott had given him. Fortunately, the contract was ending, and Ethan was divorced and back home. Candy had finally gotten her wish, and it was time for him to leave. From this day forward, they could both start their new lives. Who was that on the phone? When Sunny didn't return from the kitchen, Candy went to find him. She found him standing there, staring blankly at his phone. He snapped out of his trance and replied calmly, "It was no one." In the quiet of the night, listening to the sound of Candy's soft breathing beside him, Sunny lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The next morning, Candy frowned at the breakfast plate set before her. "You know, I don't like American-style breakfast. Why did you make this today?" He kept his eyes downcast as he speared a piece of sausage with his fork and chewed it slowly. It was all that was left in the fridge. That wasn't true. He was simply trying to get his palate accustomed to it in preparation for studying abroad. Luckily, the woman across from him didn't question it. She set her phone on the table, but kept glancing at it, clearly waiting for a message from someone. He didn't have to ask to know who. When the phone suddenly vibrated, she snatched it up immediately. Whatever Ethan had sent made her smile, the corners of her usually impassive lips turning up. Sunny watched her silently for a moment before pulling out the divorce papers he had prepared long ago. He had been preparing for this moment since the day he signed the contract. Now he was finally free. "Candy, let's get a divorce." He said it calmly, his voice as neutral as if he were commenting on the weather. Candy was so absorbed in her iMessage chat with Ethan that she barely heard him, murmuring a dismissive Sunny wasn't surprised. She had treated him with this same detached indifference for 5 years. Now that Ethan was back, she had withdrawn what little attention she ever gave him. He flipped the document to the final page and slid it across the table to her with a pen. "Sign here," he said, pointing to the line. Busy with her conversation, she didn't even glance down, simply taking the pen and signing her name where he indicated, her other hand still tapping away at her phone. Sunny took back the signed agreement. "Candy, after the mandatory 1-month waiting period, I'm leaving." Candy just hummed an acknowledgement again, then set down her fork and stood up to leave. Watching her walk away, Sunny couldn't stop himself from calling out, "Candy, do you have any idea what we were just talking about?" She paused and turned back, a confused look on her face. "It was about the donation to the orphanage, right? Wasn't that the contract you just gave me to sign? You mentioned it a few days ago. What's the problem?" He gave a bitter, silent laugh. He'd had her sign the donation contract last month. She truly didn't care about him, hadn't heard a word he'd said, but it didn't matter anymore. It was better this way. Just be happy with Ethan from now on, Candy. He forced a smile. "It's nothing." That afternoon, Sunny drove his car, following the supply truck to the orphanage where he grew up. After the work was done, he went to the director's office to say his goodbyes. "Director Matthews, I'm going abroad to continue my studies." The director was thrilled for him. Sunny had been a top student in the fine arts program, and she had always lamented his decision to give up the opportunity years ago. "Oh, Sunny, that's wonderful news," the director said, squeezing his hand with a wide smile. But then her expression clouded over. "But if you're studying abroad, you and Candy will be apart. A long-distance relationship can be very difficult. Sunny watched the children playing in the distance and shook his head. We won't be apart. We're divorced. The director stared at him, stunned for a moment, before letting out a long, heavy sigh. I knew it. I had a feeling from the start this marriage wouldn't last. If she truly loved you, why has she never once come back here with you in all these years? It's for the best. She patted his arm affectionately, offering quiet comfort. Sunny smiled and returned her embrace. Yes, it really was for the best. After returning from the orphanage, Sunny went straight upstairs to the walk-in closet and began to pack his things. It was only then that he realized how pitifully few clothes he owned. There were only the few outfits Mrs. Prescott had given him when he first married Candy. In 5 years of marriage, his wife had never once bought him a single item of clothing. Once his clothes were packed, Sunny gathered all the gifts he had given Candy over the years and sold them for scrap. He had put so much thought into every birthday present, trying to win her affection, but she had never so much as glanced at any of them. They had all been tossed aside in a corner, collecting a thick layer of dust. As he watched the recycling truck drive away, he was about to head back inside when a car horn blared behind him. He turned to see a Maybach had pulled up to the curb. A woman in a red dress stepped out. It was his sister-in-law, Chloe Prescott. Chloe glanced at the departing truck and sneered, then looked Sunny up and down with disdain. Figures. Someone from your background, selling off cardboard for pocket change. Sunny ignored her and turned to walk away. The smirk vanished from Chloe's face as she lunged forward and grabbed his arm. Sunny Miller. Ever since he had married into the Prescott family, he had been nothing but deferential and eager to please. He had never given her the cold shoulder like this before. The nerve of him. A surge of fury rose in her chest. Are you deaf? I'm talking to you. Sunny turned and yanked his arm free, his eyes flashing with irritation. Chloe had always despised him, believing someone of his standing was completely unworthy of marrying into the Prescott family. For 5 years, she had gone out of her way to make his life miserable, from dumping the breakfast he made to trampling on his freshly laundered clothes. Now that he was finally free, he had no intention of groveling for her approval any longer. Chloe was about to lash out again, but then a thought seemed to strike her, and she shot him a mocking look. You'd better sell all the cardboard you can. I guess you haven't heard. My sister's first love is back. Your time as the unwelcome guest is finally over. Just as she finished speaking, a man in a crisp white shirt stepped out of the car behind her. This was the first time Sunny had ever seen Ethan. He had soulful eyes, tousled dark hair, and pale, almost porcelain skin. Dressed in a simple white shirt with no accessories, he still possessed a captivating presence. His own 5-year, broken marriage seemed to have left no mark on him. It was no wonder Candy had been unable to forget him for all these years. Ethan walked over and gently took Chloe's hand. Chloe, don't say that. Mr. Miller is your brother-in-law. He's not my brother-in-law, Chloe retorted. Ethan, I told you in the car, my sister has always been in love with you. She's never forgotten you. She flew out of the country every single week just to be near you. All those gifts, they were from her. Can't you see how much she cares about you? Chloe then turned to Sunny and ordered, well, what are you standing there for? Get Ethan's bags and take them inside. My sister already said he can stay here. Sunny glanced at the luggage, then walked past it and into the house without a word. Chloe stomped her foot in frustration. In the end, the driver had to carry the bags inside. She was about to storm in after Sunny when Candy hurried through the front door. Her eyes landed on Ethan, who was now seated on the sofa, and she seemed to relax. She turned to Sunny. Ethan's house hasn't been lived in for years and needs renovations. He'll be staying with us for a little while. Sunny remained silent. The silence was broken by Ethan, who stood up looking troubled. Candy, maybe I should go. This is your home, after all, and Mr. Miller doesn't seem very happy about this. Candy immediately put a hand on his arm to stop him. Don't be silly. He's always very understanding. He won't be upset over something so minor. Watching this exchange, Sunny finally spoke, a faint smile playing on his lips. It's true. I won't get upset over something so minor. Please, Mr. Vance, make yourself at home. After all, he thought, this house would belong to Ethan soon enough. As if worried Ethan might still try to leave, Candy immediately instructed the staff to take his luggage to the largest guest room. Chloe shot Sunny a triumphant look. Well, what are you still standing around for? Go make dinner. And by the way, Ethan doesn't eat spicy food, so make it bland. Even though they had staff, Sunny was always the one who cooked. Candy was so demanding and picky that she wouldn't even eat food prepared by Michelin-starred chefs. Only his cooking was acceptable to her. Yet even then, she would only ever take a few bites. Occasionally, Chloe would join them for a meal, complaining with every mouthful. Now, he simply shook his head and said 3 words that stunned everyone in the room. "I can't cook." Hearing his refusal, Candy instinctively turned to look at him. In all the years she'd known him, he had never once defied a request from her or her family. This was a first. Before she could say anything, Ethan's eyes suddenly welled up. "It's my fault. I shouldn't have come. I'm just an outsider, and it's not right for me to impose on Mr. Miller like this." He turned as if to go upstairs and pack, but Candy quickly grabbed his arm. "This has nothing to do with you," she told Ethan, then turned back to Sunny, her voice hardening. "I thought you said you weren't upset. What is this supposed to mean?" Sunny calmly held up his hand. There were bandages on his index and ring fingers. "I hurt myself. I can't get it wet for a while." He wasn't actually injured at all. The contract was over, and he was done wasting his energy on Candy. The bandages were just a convenient excuse. The atmosphere in the room grew tense. Sunny had always managed the household himself, so the daily staff had already gone home for the evening. No one else in the house knew how to cook. It was too late to call anyone back. Chloe frowned, her voice dripping with annoyance. "Why didn't you say you were hurt earlier? Are you doing this on purpose to make us go hungry?" She started to step toward him, but Ethan quickly held her back. "Chloe, stop." Ethan turned to Candy. "Candy, all the time I was away, I kept thinking about that hot pot place near our old high school. Remember how we used to go there after class? Why don't we go there tonight?" Candy would never refuse a request from him. "Of course," she said, her voice softening. "I'll take you." As they left, they brought Sunny along with them. During the drive, Candy chatted with the two in the back seat. As they reminisced about high school, Ethan grew more and more animated, with Chloe occasionally adding a comment of her own. At one point, all 3 of them burst into laughter. In the middle of it, Ethan seemed to remember something and turned to Sunny in the passenger seat with a smile. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry. We don't mean to exclude you. It's just, you weren't there for these memories." It wasn't just those memories he wasn't a part of. He wouldn't be a part of their future, either. Sunny just grunted in response and closed his eyes. Candy glanced over at him, a rare occurrence, and had the strange feeling that something about him had changed. After they parked, Sunny excused himself to use the restroom. He splashed his face with cold water from the sink and looked up at his reflection in the mirror. His features were fine and his skin was pale, but neither could conceal the deep exhaustion etched between his brows. They had both been in 5-year marriages, yet Ethan's eyes were bright with energy, while his own were shadowed with fatigue. Just a little longer, he told himself, and he would finally be free. When he returned to their private booth, the other 3 had already ordered. "We'll have the clear broth base. Ethan doesn't eat meat, so please bring extra vegetables, but no cilantro," Candy instructed the server while scanning the menu. Even after all these years, she still remembered his preferences perfectly. "Sunny, is there anything you don't eat?" In 5 years, it was the first time she had ever asked. Sunny, sitting across from her, took a napkin and wiped down his bowl. "Anything is fine, except shellfish." Throughout the meal, Candy focused all her attention on Ethan. She barely ate a bite herself, instead constantly adding food to his plate. Halfway through dinner, an argument erupted at the table next to them. It escalated quickly, and soon the men were on their feet, throwing punches. Other patrons rushed over to intervene. But to everyone's shock, one of the men, in a fit of rage, grabbed the pot of boiling broth from the table and hurled it at his opponent. The intended target ducked out of the way. The pot flew past him and came hurtling directly toward their table. Amid the screams, Candy's first instinct was to throw herself in front of Ethan, shielding him with her body. Sunny had no time to react, and could only watch as the scalding broth came splashing toward him. A cry of pain escaped him. In an instant, he was drenched in the hot broth. His pale arm turned an angry red, blistering immediately. The searing pain felt like 1,000 needles pricking his skin, and it was so intense he couldn't even speak. "Sunny." Candy let go of Ethan and rushed to his side, her eyes filled with a panic he had never seen before. "Are you hurt? I'll take you to the hospital." He looked up at her, the pain radiating through his entire body, unable to form a single word. "Oh my God, Ethan, you're hurt so badly." At Chloe's cry, Candy's attention snapped to Ethan. She rushed over to him in a greater panic, only to see a few drops of oil spattered on his pale arm. It was indeed a horrifying sight. Ethan pulled his arm back, his eyes red-rimmed as he shook his head. I'm fine. Mr. Miller is much worse. You should take him to the hospital first. What do you mean you're fine? Chloe exclaimed. You've always been so sensitive. A paper cut bothers you all day. Candy, what are you waiting for? Take Ethan to the hospital. Chloe stomped her foot and pointed a finger at the men who had been fighting. Are you people crazy? If you want to fight, do it outside. You hurt Ethan, and my sister will make you pay. At this, Ethan finally winced, murmuring about the pain, yet he still insisted. It's nothing, Candy. Please, go check on Mr. Miller. He's much more seriously injured. Seeing him like this made her heart ache. She completely forgot about the drenched and injured Sonny, scooped Ethan up into her arms, and headed for the door. Just before leaving, she glanced back at Sonny with a guilty expression. Ethan has always had very sensitive skin, and he can't stand pain. The hospital isn't far. You could just get a cab. Sonny didn't snap out of his daze until their three figures had disappeared from view. He hissed in a sharp breath, trying to fight back the waves of pain. A server, seeing how badly he was burned and that he'd been abandoned, hurried over sympathetically, apologizing profusely as they administered first aid. After taking some painkillers, the pain finally subsided enough that he could at least think straight. He borrowed a change of clothes from the staff, then shakily made his way outside to hail a cab to the hospital. The doctor carefully treated the blisters with a cotton swab, instructing him to apply ointment daily to prevent scarring. Sonny squeezed his eyes shut against the pain. As he did, two nurses passed by, pushing a medical cart. I'm telling you, a mess. Prescott is really something else, one nurse said to the other. He gets a few drops of oil on him, and she rinses out the entire floor and calls in every top dermatologist for a consultation. I know, right? His injury was so minor, it was practically healed by the time he got here. I wish I had a woman that devoted to me. The other nurse laughed. Keep dreaming. A woman like that is 1 in a million. 1 in a million? Sonny thought with a bitter smile. A woman who abandons her seriously burned husband to dote on someone with a few oil splatters. Yes, she was certainly one of a kind. Once his burns were fully dressed, he thanked the doctor and left. Just as he stepped out of the hospital, a notification popped up on his phone. It was an acceptance letter from the university abroad, reminding him to prepare a piece for his portfolio submission upon arrival. For the first time in 5 years, Sonny picked up his paintbrushes again. After buying new supplies, he didn't go back to the Prescott house. Instead, he drove out to Moonstone Lake in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The scenery was breathtaking. A tranquil lake nestled between the peaks, its surface as smooth as glass, reflecting the mountains like a perfect, natural painting. It was soul-cleansing. He let out a long, slow breath, and the weight of the last 5 years seemed to evaporate, leaving only the sweet, forgotten taste of freedom. Inspiration struck, and as his brush met the canvas, a beautiful landscape began to emerge. There was no noise, no pollution, only the sound of birdsong and the whisper of the wind. For 3 full days, he lost himself in his work and the beauty of his surroundings. He didn't even turn his phone on until he came down from the mountain to ship the painting to the university. The moment it powered on, the screen was flooded with notifications. Countless missed calls and text messages, all from one person, Candy. That had never happened before. In the past, he was always the one to call and text her. She never initiated contact, never even returned a missed call. As he stared at the screen in a daze, a call came in from Chloe. He answered, and her shrill voice immediately assaulted his ear. Sonny Miller, where the hell have you been? Do you have any idea my sister has been going crazy looking for you? Don't think this little stunt will get her attention. You're dreaming. The only man in the Prescott house should be Ethan. After her tirade, Chloe hung up. Sonny frowned. Had he heard that right? Candy was looking for him? What for? He almost called Chloe back to ask if she was mistaken, but the 108 missed calls from Candy on his phone seemed to confirm her urgency. Still puzzled, he drove home with his painting. The moment he stepped out of the car, the household staff rushed to greet him, their faces a mixture of relief and joy. A few looked like they were on the verge of tears. Sir, oh sir, you're finally back. It's been chaos since you left. Miss Prescott has been unhappy with everything we do. She's been in a terrible mood for days. Hearing this, Sonny understood. She was simply unaccustomed to his absence. But she would have to get used to it. Soon, He would be gone for good, and she would have to spend the rest of her life without him. Sunny offered a few reassuring words to the staff before heading inside. The house was dark, not a single light was on. Candy was sitting alone on the sofa, her silhouette intermittently illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the window, making her features indistinct. At the sound of his footsteps, she finally looked up. She studied him for a long moment, her voice tight with suppressed annoyance. "Where have you been?" He answered calmly as he took off his jacket. "I was in the mountains, painting." She frowned. "Since when are you interested in painting?" It wasn't a sudden interest. He had been a top student in his fine arts program. If not for his obligation to her family, he would have gone abroad years ago and become a successful artist. But he didn't tell Candy any of this. He just picked up a glass and took a sip of water, his tone casual. "Just felt like it." Candy pressed her fingers to her temples. "About what happened at the restaurant, I didn't mean to abandon you. It's just that Ethan has always been delicate and can't handle pain. We grew up together, and I'm just used to looking after him. That's why I had to take him to the hospital first. Besides, you didn't object at the time, so why run off and make a scene? Ethan's house is renovated now, and he's moved out. You don't need to throw tantrums over such little things anymore." The end of her sentence was tinged with accusation. It was unclear if she was blaming him for leaving or for being so unaccommodating that her first love had to move out ahead of schedule. But Sunny didn't care anymore. He gave a non-committal grunt, set down his glass, and started for the stairs. "Sunny," he turned to see her standing up from the sofa. "I am hungry. Make me some soup." Sunny held up his bandaged hand again. "Have you forgotten? My hand is injured." Candy was taken aback for a moment, but Sunny didn't wait for her reaction. He just turned and went upstairs. A few days later, as he was coming out of his room, she held out an expensive-looking jewelry box to him. He looked up at her, confused. Candy cleared her throat. "This is to make up for what happened at the restaurant. I was so busy with Ethan that I neglected you. This is to compensate you." Sunny looked down at the emerald pinky ring in the box, a flicker of complex emotion in his eyes. 5 years. An entire 5 years, and this was the first gift she had ever given him. And it was compensation. An apology for neglecting him while she doted on her first love. He thought of the pile of meticulously chosen gifts for Ethan that she kept in her study, and a bitter irony washed over him, which he quickly suppressed. He had never dared to hope for a gift from her before, and now he no longer needed one. When he didn't immediately take it, she assumed he just didn't like it. "I've been so busy with Ethan's affairs lately, so I just had my assistant pick out the most expensive item at the auction. If you don't like it, I can." Before Candy could finish, Chloe's voice rang out from the doorway. "Ethan, I told you, my sister is crazy about you. You never should have moved out, but since you did, you should at least come visit more often," she said, pulling Ethan into the room. Her eyes landed on the ring box in Candy's hand, and she gasped in delight. "Oh my God, Candy! Ethan was just telling me how much he loved this ring. I can't believe you actually bought it for him." She glanced at Ethan, her eyes filled with envy. At her words, Ethan blushed and shyly looked down at the floor. Seeing the hesitation in Candy's eyes, Sunny acted without thinking. He took the jewelry box from her hand and offered it to Ethan. "Since it was meant for you, you should have it." With that one sentence, he made the decision for her, ending her indecision. For the first time, Candy's gaze wasn't on Ethan. Instead, she found herself looking at Sunny. For some reason, seeing his magnanimous gesture made her feel a strange sense of unease. She felt like he was different from before, but she couldn't quite put her finger on how. A month later, the mandatory waiting period for the divorce was over. Sunny could finally leave. He began to pack his remaining belongings. Halfway through, an assistant from Candy arrived with a custom-tailored suit, instructing him to attend a party at the main Prescott estate. Sunny looked at the suit and had to laugh. Legally, their marriage was already over, but Candy, completely oblivious, was still expecting him to attend a family function as her husband. He was about to refuse, but then he thought of Mrs. Prescott's kindness over the years and the fact that he still needed to pick up some travel document from her. So, he put on the suit and went to the party. The grand ballroom was glittering with lights, filled with the sound of clinking glasses and lively chatter as the scent of expensive wine wafted through the air. In the center of the room, Ethan was surrounded by a group of his friends. "Ethan, Miss Prescott is so in love with you. Seriously, that ring you're wearing was just sold at a Sotheby's auction. It's a limited edition, a symbol of one-of-a-kind love. We all heard some mystery billionaire bought it, but we never guessed it was her. It's amazing that after all these years, she's still so devoted to you. I remember back in school, she'd walk with you every day. All that candy and stuff that appeared in your desk, that was all her. Remember that one time you two fought and you ignored her for a few days? She was a wreck, asking everyone for advice on how to win you back. She looked terrible. Her eyes were all bloodshot. It was like she couldn't live without you. Ethan, there's probably no one on earth who loves you more than she does. She was a mess when she heard you'd eloped. Then, when she found out you were unhappy, she started flying out every week just to leave you gifts. Now you're both divorced, and it's obvious she doesn't care about her husband. You two should just be together. Yeah, get together. Get together. Amid the chorus of encouragement, Sonny stood in a quiet corner, watching the scene unfold. He listened as they all recounted the many ways his wife had demonstrated her undying love for another man. Sonny, a voice from behind him pulled him from his thoughts. He turned and saw Mrs. Prescott. He almost called her mom out of habit, but caught himself and respectfully addressed her as Mrs. Prescott. Hearing him use her formal name, Mrs. Prescott sighed, but didn't comment on it. She simply handed him a folder of documents. Sonny, everything is arranged for your trip. The semester starts early there, so I've already booked your flight. It leaves in 3 hours. Is there anything else you need? Sonny looked down at the documents in his hand, a wave of relief washing over him. The thought of his impending freedom, of a brand new life, made his hands tremble slightly. He took a deep breath to steady himself, placed the folder in his bag, and shook his head. Thank you, Mrs. Prescott. I'm already so grateful for everything you've done. He paused, then added quietly, I just have one small request. If Candy ever finds out about all this and asks where I am, please, just tell her you don't know. It was better if he and Candy never saw each other again. Mrs. Prescott looked at him in surprise. You mean you haven't told her you're leaving? What was there to tell her? That his pursuit of her had been a setup from the start? That his 5 years of devotion hadn't been out of love, but simply to fulfill a contract, to follow her mother's orders and help her get over Ethan? That he was divorcing her, leaving the country, and never coming back? What would be the point? Her first love was back. She probably wouldn't even care that he was leaving. Sonny just smiled. There's no need. I just want to leave quietly, without any more complications. Leaving? A woman's voice cut in from behind them. Sonny turned and found himself looking directly into Candy's dark eyes. His heart skipped a beat. He opened his mouth to say something, but he wasn't sure how much she had overheard. Fortunately, Mrs. Prescott quickly intervened. It's nothing, dear. What brings you over here? Candy didn't press the issue, her eyes flicking to the large cake on the stage. Mom, it's time for you to cut the cake. Mrs. Prescott rubbed her temple. I'm not feeling well. Why don't you two go up and cut it? Without another glance at them, she and a maid help her upstairs. After her mother had gone, Candy held out her hand to Sonny. Come on, let's go cut the cake. He shook his head, holding up his still bandaged hand. I can't. It's not healed yet. You should ask Ethan. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, as if she couldn't comprehend his words. She had the unsettling feeling that something was slipping from her grasp. Why would I ask him? Now it was Sonny's turn to be confused. Why? Wasn't she always the one abandoning him to run to Ethan's side? She had flown out of the country for Ethan countless times over the past 5 years. Now that he was giving her an opening, why was she acting so surprised? He offered a small smile. Because you two were so close. It's just cutting a cake. It's no big deal. Seeing the smile on his face, she had to admit he didn't seem angry. Though she still felt something was off, she didn't press it. She walked over to Ethan and whispered something in his ear. Ethan blushed, but nodded, and the two of them went up on stage together. Their hands joined as they cut the cake. To the sound of a gentle piano melody, the two of them stood close together, looking less like they were cutting a birthday cake and more like they were cutting a wedding cake. As the night wore on, the older guests began to depart, leaving behind the younger crowd. These were the people who had grown up with Candy and Ethan, who knew their whole story. Seeing them together on stage now, they erupted in applause. A few even started chanting, He's here, he's here, he's here, he's here. The chant grew louder, and Ethan's face turned a deep shade of crimson. Candy's ears flushed, and while she didn't kiss him, she made no move to stop the crowd's encouragement. Sonny paid them no mind. He took out his phone and silently calculated his departure time. If his flight was in 3 hours, he needed to leave now. But to everyone else in the room, his quiet detachment looked like heartbreak. Soon, a group of young socialites, led by Chloe, approached him, smirking. By the time Sonny looked up, he was surrounded. Chloe smiled sweetly at him. Sonny Miller. So what if you're married to my sister? You still have to stand here all alone and watch her with Ethan. I told you from the beginning. My sister is in love with Ethan. She only married you to get over him. Anyone with any sense would have left by now. How can you be so shameless as to keep clinging to her? Sonny needed to get home and finish packing. He had no time for this. He turned to walk away, but the group grew more aggressive, blocking his path. The ugly duckling trying to become a swan. What a joke. If Ethan hadn't left the country, do you really think someone like you would have ever had a chance to marry into the Prescott family? Don't you know your place? I'm telling you, if you have any dignity, you'll step aside and get out of this family for good. They started pushing him as they spoke. What? Cat got your tongue. We're talking to you. Are you listening? When Sonny still didn't respond, one of the more aggressive guys in the group lost his patience and shoved him hard from behind. There was a tremendous crash. Sonny stumbled backward, crashing into the towering pyramid of champagne glasses behind him. The tower collapsed in a shower of shattered glass and sparkling wine, now stained with his blood. The entire party fell silent as every eye in the room turned to him. On the stage, Candy's eyes widened in shock. She let go of Ethan's hand and rushed through the crowd. Seeing Sonny lying on the floor, covered in blood and champagne, her eyes blazed with fury. She knelt down to help him up. As she instructed someone to call her private doctor, she glared at the stunned crowd around them. Who did this? She demanded, her voice ice cold. No one dared to speak. Her expression was thunderous. Just as she was about to speak again, a security guard hurried over. Miss Prescott, Mr. Vance is complaining of a severe stomachache. You should come quickly. Candy didn't let go of Sonny, but her brow furrowed. Is it serious? The guard looked worried. He's doubled over in pain, ma'am. This time, it was Candy who hesitated. She looked at Sonny, her expression conflicted. Sonny, he knew what she was going to say. He struggled to sit up on his own, his face impassive. I know, he said, cutting her off. He's always been delicate, and the slightest thing upsets him, and you're used to taking care of him. She was stunned that he had taken the words right out of her mouth. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Sonny staggered to his feet. It's fine. Go be with him. Have a doctor see him first. I can take care of myself. For some reason, his casual indifference sent a strange jolt of panic through her. He had always been this understanding in the past. But today, despite being so seriously injured, his understanding felt excessive. It was an understanding so complete that it seemed she no longer existed in his eyes. This wasn't like him. Before, his eyes had only ever held her. Why had he changed so much? Candy started to say something else, but was interrupted by the sound of Ethan crying out in pain from the other room. That decided it. She stopped hesitating and looked at Sonny guiltily. Sonny, I'll check on you later. I'll make this up to you. Without another moment of hesitation, she left him and hurried away. As Sonny watched her rush out, anxiously cooing over Ethan, a sarcastic smile touched his lips. But to Chloe and her friends, he just looked like a man who had been pitifully cast aside. Oomph. I thought for a second my sister might actually feel sorry for you, but she still dropped you in a heartbeat, Chloe sneered. Sonny Miller, if you have any dignity at all, you'll leave this family on your own. Sonny ignored them. He asked a staff member for an empty room, cleaned and bandaged his cuts, changed into a fresh set of clothes, and limped out of the estate. When he got back to their house, he went straight upstairs to finish packing. He brought his suitcase downstairs and left the signed divorce papers on the coffee table. As he opened the front door to leave, he came face to face with someone who was just about to enter. It was Chloe. Seeing him, she immediately launched into a complaint. Where have you been? My sister sent me to bring you some medicine. I don't know what's wrong with her, worrying about you instead of staying with Ethan. She made me come all the way over here, and I've been looking all over for you. I don't need it. You should save it for Ethan, Sonny said calmly, pushing past her to leave. It was only then that Chloe noticed the suitcase in his hand. Her expression changed. She grabbed his arm. What are you doing? Sonny looked at her, his eyes betraying no emotion. I'm holding a suitcase. What does it look like I'm doing? It's obvious. I'm leaving. Your sister loves Ethan. You've always wanted him as a brother-in-law. Now I'm divorcing her and getting out of the way, so you can have what you want. Chloe stared at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. She seemed completely stunned, unable to process his words. After all, everyone in their circle knew how madly in love with Candy he had been. How could he just up and leave? Then, a look of understanding crossed her face, though her voice trembled slightly. Sonny Miller, Stop pretending. You love my sister. You were desperate to marry her. You wouldn't just divorce her now. I see what this is. You're playing hard to get. Well, let me tell you, it won't work on her. Sunny's gaze remained steady. If you want to know if it's real, the divorce papers are on the table. You can see for yourself. Chloe, you're still holding onto my arm. Don't tell me you're going to miss me. At his words, Chloe recoiled as if burned, snatching her hand back. As if, I can't wait for you to leave. I'll throw a party the second you're gone. My sister will be thrilled to hear you're finally leaving on your own. For some reason, that last sentence lacked its usual conviction. Sunny didn't look at her again. Then congratulations to you all on getting what you wanted, he said, and walked out the door. Watching his retreating back, seeing not a hint of hesitation, Chloe felt for the first time that something was spinning completely out of her control. A strange panic seized her, and she called out after him. Sonny Miller, where are you going? Aren't you even going to say goodbye to my sister? Sonny paused, his hand on the handle of his suitcase. He looked back at Chloe, and beyond her at the house he was leaving behind. To repay a debt, he had pretended to love Candy for 5 years, becoming, in their eyes, the shameless man who wouldn't leave her alone. To repay a debt, he had thrown away his dreams, his future, and himself. For 5 years, he had tried to be the perfect husband, diligently managing every aspect of their home. Yet he had received no respect and had lost all sense of self. He had lived that suffocating life for 5 long years. Now his debt was paid. Now he was finally free. For the first time in a long time, Sunny smiled. It was a genuine, unrestrained smile. I'm going to live a life that belongs to Sonny Miller. From this moment on, everything and everyone here had nothing to do with him. Goodbye, Prescott family. Goodbye, Candy. He gave a final, liberating wave, and then, pulling his suitcase behind him, he walked out into the moonlight and disappeared into the night. 3 days later, Candy finally found a moment to stop by the house for a change of clothes. The moment she walked in, she called out Sonny's name from habit. After a few calls, only the household staff appeared. Where is he? She frowned as a maid, unaccustomed to the task, awkwardly took her coat and shoes. The staff member hesitated for a long moment before answering. He's not here, ma'am. She slipped on her slippers and walked further into the house. Not home again. He had done the same thing after the restaurant incident, disappearing for days to paint without a word. This time was no different. She had taken Ethan to the hospital, and Sonny had even graciously told her to go ahead. And now he was throwing another tantrum and running away. A familiar annoyance began to curdle into a hot, nameless anger. As she approached the sofa, her eyes fell on a document lying on the coffee table. Normally, she wouldn't have given it a second glance. But today, for some reason, she felt compelled to pick it up. The words divorce agreement seemed to leap off the page. And there on the signature line was her own name. In an instant, her expression turned to ice. The light vanished from her eyes, replaced by a chilling, bottomless darkness. She ran her finger over the signature. It wasn't a print or a forgery. It was undeniably her own handwriting. But she had no memory of signing any divorce papers. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed in thought. She suddenly remembered that morning over breakfast. He had handed her something to sign. She had been too busy texting Ethan to pay any attention. Now she realized what it must have been. The divorce papers. The papers crumpled in her fist before she tore them into tiny pieces, letting them flutter to the floor. Sonny divorcing her? It was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. He loved her. He loved her enough to jump into the ocean for her. She had abandoned him time and time again, and he had never once gotten angry. This was just jealousy. She had been spending a lot of time with Ethan lately, and he was feeling insecure. After 5 years, he was allowed to be a little jealous. He would come back on his own, and if he didn't know, he would. She was certain of it. After all, no one in the world loved her as much as Sonny did. In the days that followed, the staff at the house had an unspoken agreement not to mention Sonny's name. This continued until the day Candy brought Ethan home from a checkup. Chloe took one bite of the soup she was served, threw down her spoon, and whined. Who made this slop? Where's Sonny? Tell him to come make us something edible. A staff member answered hesitantly. Miss, he hasn't been back for several days, so... Chloe's eyes widened. Sonny still wasn't back? She had assumed his talk of divorce was just an act. After all, marrying into their family was the chance of a lifetime for someone like him. Any sane person would cling to that for dear life. She remembered the torn papers she'd seen in the trash and looked over at her sister. The staff had told her Candy had seen the papers too, but had simply torn them up and thrown them away, not taking them seriously. Chloe bit her lip and glanced at Ethan. He was quietly eating his soup, seemingly oblivious to their conversation. Her sister had waited for Ethan for so many years. Now he was back, and Sunny was out of the picture. Logically, her sister should be ecstatic. But when Chloe looked at Candy, she saw a slight frown on her face, a look of annoyance at Sunny's continued absence. Thinking of Sunny made Chloe resentful all over again. He was gone, yet he was still managing to upset her sister. After dinner, a staff member helped Ethan upstairs to his room. Chloe looked at Candy, who was still sitting at the table, and decided to speak up. Candy, when are you going to make things official with Ethan? I've been waiting for years for him to be my brother-in-law. Candy's head snapped up. What did you just say? Chloe had always been a little intimidated by her older sister, and she shrank back slightly, but she held her ground. Sunny divorced you. You don't love him. Why aren't you with Ethan? How do you know Sunny and I are divorced? Chloe swallowed hard. That day you sent me over with the medicine. I saw the papers. At the time, she had just assumed it was an empty threat. But now that so much time had passed, she was forced to admit it might be real. As Candy listened, her expression grew darker. She didn't need to think twice to realize it now. The divorce papers hadn't been a tantrum. He had been serious. She slammed her coffee cup down on the table. How dare he? After loving her so devotedly, how dare he divorce her? She had clearly been too lenient with him all these years. Besides, where could he possibly go without her? Call him. She ordered a nearby staff member. Tell him to stop this nonsense and come home immediately. The woman opened her mouth, then closed it, looking distressed. We've tried calling him, ma'am, but the number is out of service. Candy pulled out her own phone and scrolled through her contacts. After a moment, she realized she didn't even have his number saved. The last time she'd needed to reach him, her assistant had made the call. She got the number from the staff and dialed it herself. A recorded voice answered. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He had actually disconnected his number. Candy stared at the dark screen of her phone, her eyes smoldering with rage. She shot to her feet and stormed out of the house, ignoring Chloe's frantic calls behind her. It wasn't until she was in her car, stopped at a red light, that she finally began to calm down. Where was she even going to look for him? Sunny had been an orphan. Before the Prescott Scholarship, he had lived at the local orphanage. As the car behind her honked, she made a sharp U-turn and headed in that direction. Seeing her visitor, the director's warm expression cooled for the first time. She asked another teacher to take the children outside before taking a seat. Miss Prescott, please have a seat. What can I do for you? Candy decided to ignore the woman's chilly demeanor. I was hoping you might know where Sunny has gone. She had been about to say that the house was a mess without him, but remembering who she was talking to, she swallowed her words. A flicker of derision crossed the director's eyes. After 5 years of marriage, she still referred to him by his full name. She felt a pang of pity for the boy, but it was quickly followed by a wave of relief. She was glad Sunny had fulfilled his obligation and gotten away from this woman. She was not the kind of person worth spending a life with. Director Matthews didn't look at Candy again, instead turning her attention to the paperwork on her desk. You were married to him for 5 years, and you have no idea where he is. How would I? She said dismissively. I think it's time for you to leave, Ms. Prescott. Back in her car, having learned nothing, Candy slammed her fist against the steering wheel. Sunny Miller. She had been so sure the divorce papers were just a childish tantrum. But now, with his phone disconnected and no one knowing his whereabouts, she was forced to confront the truth. He had really meant it, but she couldn't accept it. He had loved her so much. Why would he leave her so decisively? Just then, her phone rang. It was her mother, her voice sounding weak on the other end of the line. Candy, please come home. I have something to tell you. Mrs. Prescott looked at her daughter and sighed. Now that you and Sunny are divorced, and Ethan is back and single again, perhaps you and— Mom, Candy interrupted her. I didn't agree to a divorce. Mrs. Prescott's eyes widened in surprise. She opened a drawer and pulled out an official-looking document. But the divorce is already finalized. Didn't Sunny tell you? Seeing the genuine confusion on her daughter's face, Mrs. Prescott was even more bewildered. She had assumed Sunny had only kept his travel plans from Candy, not the divorce itself. How on earth had he gotten her to sign the papers? Candy stared at the divorce certificate, her eyes darkening as a fire of rage ignited in her chest. She had thought it was just the initial papers, but he had already gone through with the final decree. If she remembered correctly, there was a mandatory 1-month waiting period. That meant he had started the process over a month ago. Seeing her mother's confused expression, she quickly offered a vague explanation. Then she asked her mother why she was suddenly pushing her toward Ethan. Mrs. Prescott smiled faintly. You were so heartbroken over him back then. Now that he's back, and you and Sonny are divorced, I just thought. Before, everyone had said she and Ethan weren't right for each other. Now that they were both single again, everyone was saying they were a perfect match. A strange unease settled in her stomach. But I never agreed to divorce Sonny. For some reason, the finality of it made her panic. Over the past 5 years, she had grown completely dependent on his care. She couldn't imagine her life without him. Besides, Sonny loved her more than life itself. This divorce had to be a tantrum. As for Ethan, yes, she cared for him. He was her first love, the boy she had dreamed of for years. But the thought of giving up Sonny for him, she found she couldn't do it. Seeing the conflict in her daughter's eyes, Mrs. Prescott pulled another file from a drawer. When Candy saw the title, Service Agreement, and Sonny's signature at the bottom, her eyes widened in shock. Mom, what is this? She was her daughter, after all. Mrs. Prescott decided it was time for the truth. When Ethan left the country and got married, you were completely devastated. I wanted to find someone to help you move on. Sonny's timely visit to express his gratitude had provided the perfect solution. The two of them had quickly come to an arrangement. The agreement was simple. Sonny would stay with Candy for 5 years and help her get over her heartbreak. In return, his debt to the family would be considered paid in full. To be fair, Sonny had performed his duties perfectly for 5 years, always maintaining a professional distance, even continuing to call her Mrs. Prescott. Mrs. Prescott had even considered that if Ethan never returned, she might have accepted Sonny as her real son-in-law. But just as the 5-year term was ending, Ethan came back, and her daughter got into a car accident while rushing to see him. Before Mrs. Prescott could even decide what to do, Sonny had come to her and announced his intention to leave. As her mother spoke, the world seemed to go silent for Candy. She gripped the service agreement, her hands shaking, her mind a complete void. What had she just heard? So his 5 years of devotion, it was all just part of contract? He had never loved her, and that was why he was so eager to leave the moment Ethan returned. But the look in his eyes, she couldn't have imagined the love she saw there. If he didn't love her, why would he have jumped into the ocean for her? Why would he have dedicated 5 years of his life to her? She stared at the agreement, her expression a mixture of emotions. It detailed all of his duties over the past 5 years. The further she read, the paler she became. The clauses range from being responsible for her physical safety to personally managing every single household chore. Every kind act, every thoughtful gesture had been dictated by the contract. There were no personal feelings involved. The last shred of hope in Candy's heart was crushed by the cold, hard clauses of the agreement. A tidal wave of anger and despair washed over her, threatening to pull her under. With a sharp rip, the agreement disintegrated in her hands. In her mother's experience, her daughter had always been the epitome of calm and control. She had only ever lost her composure once before, when Ethan had left. This was the second time she had ever seen her so distraught over a man. Mrs. Prescott decided to keep her thoughts to herself. Candy took several deep breaths, forcing herself to regain some semblance of calm. If Sonny had signed this contract with her mother, then her mother must know where he had gone. She looked up at her mother, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Mom, you must know where he went. Mrs. Prescott looked at her daughter for a long moment. She did know. After all, she had been the one to make all his travel arrangements. But Sonny had specifically asked her not to tell anyone where he was going. She looked at her daughter, her expression pained. I am sorry, dear. I can't tell you, she added with a bitter smile. And besides, even if I did, it wouldn't do you any good. Sonny must have anticipated this. He must have guessed that, as her mother, she would eventually tell her, which is why he hadn't gone to the university she had arranged for him. The hope in Candy's eyes died, replaced by despair. She had never imagined he would be so determined to disappear from her life, just as suddenly as he had entered it. Mrs. Prescott, for her part, felt only a mild sense of regret as she asked her next question. So what about you and Ethan? Her question was cut off by the shrill ringing of Candy's phone. She answered, and Chloe's frantic voice came through the line. Candy, you have to come home. Something's happened to Ethan. When Candy arrived home, she found a group of strangers standing outside. The woman leading them had sharp, elegant features and was watching with cold eyes as Ethan stood nearby, crying into his hands. Candy recognized her immediately. It was Ethan's ex-wife. She hurried over. Chloe spotted her and waved frantically. "Candy, over here." At the sound of her name, the group turned to look at her. The ex-wife, in particular, gave her a thorough, intimidating appraisal that made Candy's heart skip a beat. Candy walked over to stand beside Ethan. "Ms. Wallace, what brings you to our home?" Heather Wallace looked at her and gave a cold, humorless laugh. "What am I doing here? I think you know better than anyone, Miss Prescott. Ethan and I were married for 5 years, and for 5 years, you were harassing my husband. In fact, I'd say our divorce is largely thanks to you." Candy was baffled. It was true that she had flown out weekly to see Ethan, but she had always been so careful. The gifts she left were anonymous and generic. Heather looked at her as if she were a complete fool. She and Ethan may have married quickly, but she had entered the marriage with a sincere heart, fully intending to build a life with him. It was only after she took full control of her family's corporation and became consumed with restructuring it that she had started to neglect him. Seeing his sad posts on Facebook, she had meant to explain things to him, but she was always being pulled away by another urgent business call. It was during this period that all those little gifts, things you couldn't easily find in the States, started appearing on their doorstep. She checked the security footage and discovered it was Candy who had been leaving them. A white-hot rage had ignited within her. She had thrown all the gifts at Ethan's feet, and it had led to the first of many terrible fights. In the end, Ethan had divorced her behind her back and returned home. Heather stared at Candy. "Such fine manners you have, Miss Prescott. A married woman, pining after another woman's husband." At her words, the color drained from Candy's face. "I'm divorced now," she said quietly. Behind her, Ethan looked up sharply, his eyes wide with surprise. He had always known Candy had a crush on him, but he had only ever seen her as a younger sister. The night a mutual friend had warned him she was planning to confess her feelings, he had been about to introduce his new girlfriend to his parents. To avoid the awkward confrontation, he had impulsively married Heather and left the country. Perhaps because they had married in such a rush, their relationship had been fragile. Heather had been devoted at first, but as her work consumed her, and with the constant, subtle pressure from her male colleagues and her own failure to communicate, their marriage had begun to fall apart. Candy had seen his unhappy Facebook posts, which had prompted the gifts. He knew Candy was married, and he knew his passive complaints were causing trouble for both of their marriages. He had tried to get rid of the gifts secretly, but Heather had caught him in the act. It was the final straw. The argument that followed had been the one to shatter their marriage completely. Soon after, he had secretly filed for divorce and returned home. His parents were overseas and couldn't help him. He had been planning to stay at one of his family's hotels when Candy, having somehow heard the news of his divorce, showed up. He was not a brave person by nature. Secretly divorcing Heather had been the boldest move of his life. Faced with Candy's determined advances, he had tried to refuse, insisting he had a place to stay. But she had acted as if she hadn't heard him, and had practically dragged him back to her home. He had been secretly relieved when he thought Sonny would object to him staying, seeing it as a chance to escape. He was shocked when Sonny agreed. As soon as his own house was ready, he had waited for Sonny to be out and moved out without a word. They had been friends for so long, and he didn't want to destroy that. But every time he tried to create distance, she seemed to misinterpret it. It was a frustrating situation, and hearing that Sonny had now divorced her and left only filled him with more guilt. He never should have come back. Heather didn't even glance at Candy as she pulled Ethan away from her. "Ethan!" Candy cried out, reaching for him, but Heather's bodyguards moved to block her path. "Ethan, I was wrong," Heather said, her voice softer now. "I apologize. I promise things will be different from now on. Will you come home with me?" She added, "As for the divorce, I've already filed to have it withdrawn." Ethan hesitated. "Ethan, don't do it," Candy cried out, panic flashing in her eyes. She knew how much he had suffered in his marriage to Heather. If he went back, he would just be setting himself up for more pain. Chloe nodded vigorously beside her. "That's right, Ethan. My sister is the one for you." Ethan looked down at his hand, which was still held tightly in Heather's, and took a deep breath. He looked up at Candy. "Candy, thank you for taking care of me." His words seemed to shatter something inside her. "Ethan," she whispered. Ethan bit his lip. "My whole life, I've been too weak, too afraid to say no. You were always the one who stood up for me, and I'll always be grateful for that. Now, I'm finally finding the courage to speak for myself, but I'm still so scared that I end up crying, and I know you've always misinterpreted that. I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding I've caused." Sunny is a good man. I owe him an apology, too. He looked at her one last time. Candy, I think it's best if we don't see each other again. Candy couldn't remember how the whole chaotic scene finally ended. The crowd dispersed, and once again, Candy was left alone in the house. Seeing her daughter fall back into a state of despair, Mrs. Prescott was filled with a mixture of anger and pity. She was angry that her daughter allowed herself to be so destroyed by love, and she was heartbroken knowing that this time, there was no Sunny to pull her out of it. The series of blows seemed to transform Candy into someone else entirely. The gossip, of course, eventually made its way across the ocean. Italy. As Sunny was leaving his art studio, a friend ran up to him, holding out his phone. Sunny, you've got to see this. It was an article about Candy. Sunny glanced at the screen as he gathered his supplies and just grunted. That's it? That's your only reaction? His friend asked, bewildered. Sunny shrugged. What do you want me to say? Their social circle was small, and everyone knew the story. Candy's dramatic accident and subsequent marriage had been the talk of the town for months. They also knew about the lengths Sunny had gone to for her. Their perspective, however, was vastly different from that of Candy's sycophantic friends. They couldn't understand how she could take such a good man for granted, all while shamelessly pursuing someone else's husband. His friend threw his hands up in the air, his face a mask of indignation. If I were you, I want to fly back there and slap some sense into her. Sunny just laughed quietly. The moment he'd left the country, he had stopped caring about any of it. Late one night, as Sunny was putting the finishing touches on a painting, the silence was broken by the shrill ring of his phone. It was a call from a friend back home. He answered, and the friend's excited voice burst through the speaker. Sunny, you're not going to believe this. Candy Prescott has lost her mind. Lost her mind? He frowned. He then learned that in the time since his departure and Ethan's reconciliation with his ex-wife, Candy had apparently spiraled. She had become a recluse, drinking all day. In the past, he would have been there with a hangover remedy. Now, in his absence, she had apparently started to appreciate his devotion, and her desire to find him had become an obsession. But of course, he hadn't gone to the university Mrs. Prescott had arranged. Candy had no idea what country he was even in. She had apparently neglected her duties at the Prescott group to focus on the search. She had even, his friend told him, systematically retaliated against everyone who had been part of the Champagne Tower incident. Even her own sister, Chloe, had been unceremoniously shipped off to Australia. His friend was right. It sounded like she had completely lost it. Sunny idly toyed with a rose on his windowsill, his eyes downcast. From the very beginning, Candy had been an assignment, a task to be completed so he could be free. He had initially flown to the destination Mrs. Prescott had arranged, but upon landing, he had immediately bought a new ticket to Italy. Since then, he had thrown himself completely into his art, giving no thought to Candy or his past life. Hearing about her now, only one thought came to mind. A love that arrives too late is worthless. Besides, he had never loved her, so why should he care about her regrets? The next day, Sunny went about his routine as usual. As he was leaving for the studio, he saw his friend waiting for him at the door. He took the warm pastry his friend offered him and handed him a wrapped birthday present in return. They were laughing and talking as they walked to the studio, but when they arrived, they learned that classes had been canceled for a special guest lecture from a world-renowned artist. So, they packed up their easels and headed to the main campus. The lecture hall was packed. Sunny and his friend managed to squeeze their way in and found 2 empty seats in the very last row. A knock on the door silenced the room. When the guest lecturer walked in, a hush fell over the previously buzzing crowd. The reason was simple. The man was incredibly handsome. In the art world, they were surrounded by beautiful people, but no one they had ever seen could compare to the man standing at the front of the room. When Sunny got a clear look at his face, he gasped. He knew him. It's been a long time, Sunny. The man at the podium was smiling directly at him, and Sunny felt his eyes begin to burn. It was Leo Foster, his closest friend from the orphanage. Leo and another girl, Maya, had been a few years older than him and had always looked out for him. But fate had been kinder to them. They had both been adopted by loving families, while he had remained at the orphanage until he received the Prescott Scholarship. Looking at the gaunt young man before him, Leo's heart ached. He remembered a happy little boy who had thrived under his and Maya's protection. But fate had intervened, and they had both been adopted, leaving him behind. They had all been too young to have contact information, and so the 3 of them had lost touch. Leo had spent years searching for them both, but had only managed to find Maya. That is, until he saw the announcement of Candy Prescott's wedding on the Prescott Group's website. And that's how he learned that Sunny had married her. He had followed the gossip over the years, and his heart broke for his old friend, knowing how the once cheerful boy was being worn down by the toxic marriage. When he learned Sunny was studying in Italy, he and Maya had decided to relocate to Rome. As they talked, Sunny learned that Leo and Maya were now married, and had moved to be closer to him. This time, Sunny couldn't hold back the tears. All the pain and loneliness of the past years came pouring out. That evening, when he saw Maya for the first time at dinner, a fresh wave of tears came. The three of them talked late into the night. Maya placed a plate of his favorite food in front of him. "Sunny, what are your plans now?" she asked gently. Sunny finished the last bite of his steak and shook his head. "I don't have any yet. For now, I just want to graduate and then maybe have my own exhibition or find a job I enjoy. As for going back home," his expression grew distant. He knew he had to go back eventually, if only to see Director Matthews and repay the money she had secretly tucked into his bag when he left. But going back also meant potentially running into Candy, and the thought of her recent obsessive behavior made him uneasy. Leo and Maya exchanged a look and quickly changed the subject. "Let's just eat for now. You can figure out the future later. We'll support you no matter what." The seasons changed, and soon it was late autumn, and the day of Sunny's graduation had arrived. Looking out at the ceremony, Sunny was overcome with emotion. The graduation he had been forced to postpone for 5 years was finally here. "Congratulations, Sunny. Happy graduation, Sunny." His friends gathered around him, offering bouquets and congratulations, and his eyes grew misty once again. At their farewell dinner, Sunny allowed himself to relax and had a few glasses of wine. The bitter liquid slid down his throat, bringing with it a wave of bittersweet emotion. Knowing it might be a long time before they saw each other again, they spent the night laughing and crying, reminiscing until the early hours of the morning. A week later, Sunny packed his bags, said his goodbyes, and flew back home with Leo and Maya. It wasn't a permanent move, just a temporary visit. He wanted to see Director Matthews, and he had also agreed to collaborate on an exhibition with a friend. Seeing the director for the first time in 2 years, Sunny's eyes once again filled with tears. The director held his hand, her eyes shining with pride as he told her about his graduation and his plans. In the middle of their conversation, she suddenly said, "By the way, not long after you left, Candy Prescott came here looking for you." It had been so long since he'd heard her name that he was momentarily taken aback. The director continued, "But I could tell from the way she was acting that she hadn't treated you well, so I didn't tell her a thing." After dinner with the director, he returned to Leo and Maya's home. Since his trip was only temporary, they had insisted he stay with them. When he walked in, Maya greeted him warmly, fussing over him and leading him to the kitchen for a bowl of soup. They chatted for a while about the upcoming exhibition before Sunny finally retired to his room. In a high-rise office in downtown Riverton, Candy Prescott stared at a photograph on her desk, lost in thought. 2 years. For 2 whole years, she had used all the resources of the Prescott family and had found no trace of him. She looked at the young, uncertain face in the photo and gave a bitter smile. It was their wedding photo, the only picture they had ever taken together. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. She finally understood what that meant. When he first left, she had told herself she was just struggling to adjust to his absence, that she had simply grown accustomed to his care. But after finding the service agreement and everything that followed, she had been forced to admit the truth. Her dependence on him had, at some point, turned into love. A love she had been blind to because of her lingering obsession with Ethan. And now, just as she was ready to admit it, he was long gone. A knock on her office door pulled her from her thoughts. Her assistant, Nathan, entered. "Ms. Prescott, you've received an invitation to a new artist's exhibition downtown tomorrow." It was only after he left that Candy realized how little she had actually known about him. When he had returned from the mountains, she had assumed it was a new hobby. She later learned that he had been a gifted artist his whole life, and that if he hadn't given up his scholarship for her, he would have been a rising star in the art world. In an effort to understand him, to feel closer to him, she had started attending every art exhibition in Riverton. Meanwhile, Sunny's friend sent him the guest list for their opening night, a list of prominent media members and local patrons of the arts, so he could be prepared. When Sunny saw Candy Prescott's name on the list, he froze. Seeing his reaction, his friend quickly added, "If you don't want to see her, you don't have to come out for the press interviews." He smiled and shook his head. It's fine. He had known since the day he returned that they would run into each other eventually. You could run, but you couldn't hide forever. Besides, what did he have to be afraid of? His debt to her family was paid. They were strangers now. On the day of the exhibition, a steady stream of guests flowed into the gallery. Among them was Candy. Over the past 2 years, she had attended countless exhibitions and had developed a decent eye for art. Every piece in the gallery was impressive, but one in particular stopped her in her tracks. It was a simple, yet powerful landscape of a mountain scene. The plaque beside it read, "Freedom." For some reason, the painting made her think of Sunny. For 5 years, his entire world had revolved around her. He had been a prisoner in their home, waiting for her day and night. He had lost himself, had no freedom. It was the most basic human right, and for him, it had been an impossible dream. As she stared at the painting, lost in thought, a familiar voice drifted over to her. She turned toward the sound, and there he was, the man she had been searching for 2 years. In that instant, the noisy gallery seemed to fall silent. All she could see was him. He stood tall and confident, smiling as he discussed his work with a potential buyer. Sunny. He frowned at the sound of his name. Before he could turn, a pair of arms wrapped around him, and he was enveloped in a cloyingly sweet, familiar perfume. Candy was clinging to him, her body trembling. Sunny, you're finally back. He was about to push her away, but someone else beat him to it, pulling her off of him. It was Leo. Sunny, are you all right? Sunny shook his head. Leo glared at Candy, his eyes like chips of ice. Candy Prescott, why do you have to show your face here? Every time he saw her, Leo was reminded of the 5 years of misery his friend had endured, and his anger flared anew. Candy opened her mouth to say something, but Sunny stepped between them. Leo, let's take this somewhere else. He wasn't about to let her ruin the exhibition he and his friends had worked so hard to create. In the cafe on the second floor of the gallery, Leo stood protectively in front of Sunny and Maya, glaring at Candy. You and Sunny are divorced. Why are you still harassing him? Candy looked past Leo at Sunny's cold, indifferent expression, and her heart clenched so tightly it was hard to breathe. He had never looked at her like that before. The moment she had seen him, 1,000 questions had flooded her mind. But now only one came out. Sunny, why did you divorce me? Maya rolled her eyes. What a stupid question. Sunny just looked at her, his expression unreadable. My debt was paid, so it was time for me to leave. He had known, the moment she found the papers, that she would eventually learn the truth about their arrangement. So, it was all just part of the agreement? The last 5 years. Candy's hands clenched into fists, her voice trembling as she spoke. Yes, Sunny replied, his voice still unervingly calm. From the moment your mother had me sign that service agreement, our relationship was nothing more than a transaction. I reminded myself of that every day. In fact, I drafted the divorce papers the same day I signed the contract. She had been the first woman he had ever been with, and he had been forced to marry her before he had even really started his adult life. He had been young and naive, and he had been afraid that he might be fooled by the illusion of their life together. So he had prepared the divorce papers as a constant reminder of the truth. Whenever he felt himself starting to develop real feelings for her, he would take out the papers to remind himself of the reality of their situation, of the vast gulf between their worlds. Had he ever started to fall in love with her? Maybe. But every time a genuine emotion started to bloom, she would cast him aside for Ethan. Any person would have grown weary of that treatment, let alone someone who was only there to fulfill an obligation. It was a testament to his character that he didn't actively hate her. 5 years had felt like an eternity, long enough that he had started to believe it would be his whole life. And yet, it had also been fleeting. In the blink of an eye, it was over, and he was free. With every cold, emotionless word he spoke, the color drained further from Candy's face. Candy, I have never been in love with you. Not then, not now, not ever. He delivered the final blow. Between us, there was only ever the contract. He didn't care how she reacted. He just wanted this to be over, so he could get back to his exhibition. Candy tried to go after him, but Leo continued to block her path. She could only watch helplessly as Sunny's back disappeared through the doorway. The exhibition, despite the brief interruption, was a resounding success. To celebrate, Leo and Maya took him to his favorite restaurant. Before their food could arrive, however, a large bouquet of red roses was delivered to their table. Excuse me, is there a Mr. Miller here? The waiter asked. These are from a Ms. Prescott to congratulate you on the success of your exhibition. Sonny didn't even reach for them. He just told the waiter to take them back. Please inform Miss Prescott that I don't like red roses. Red roses were Ethan's favorite. He had always preferred wild, thorny briar roses. The warm, celebratory atmosphere at the table instantly evaporated. The waiter stood there awkwardly, holding the bouquet, unsure of what to do. When Sonny remained silent, the waiter finally retreated. But this rejection didn't deter Candy. She began sending a bouquet of briar roses to his studio every day. And every day, they were thrown in the trash before they even made it through the door. At another gallery opening, Candy cornered him, demanding to know why he wouldn't accept her flowers. Sonny looked at her for a long moment, then gave a humorless laugh. They had been married for 5 years, and she still knew absolutely nothing about him. Because I don't like you, he said bluntly. And therefore, I don't like anything that comes from you. Candy, why can't we just let this go? We're divorced. Shouldn't you be happy about that? She took a shaky breath, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She reached for his hand. No, Sonny, that's not it. I wasn't happy about the divorce. I'd gotten used to having you in my life. No, it's more than that. It wasn't until you were gone that I realized it was you I loved all along. Ethan, that was just a childhood obsession I couldn't let go of. He's gone now. Why can't we go back to the way things were? The way things were? A flicker of disbelief crossed Sonny's face. The way things were had been a living hell for him. He had no desire to go back. He stepped away from her outstretched hand, his voice turning to ice. Candy, listen to yourself. You're not in love with me. You're just used to me. I was like a live-in butler. Only I was one who was willing to die for you. Do you really think that's love? Do you even believe that yourself? The color drained from her face. In all the years he had known her, he had never seen her look so defeated. Candy Prescott had always been so proud, so untouchable. Now, she looked utterly broken, all because he had refused to play along and had instead forced her to confront the truth. He didn't give her another glance before turning and walking away. Just as he stepped out of the gallery, his phone rang. It was Mrs. Prescott. When he thought of her, Sonny's primary emotion was still gratitude. After all, she had given him a way to clear his debt. When he had started college, he had barely had enough money to survive after paying tuition. He hadn't wanted to be indebted to the Prescott family, and a 5-year service agreement had seemed like the most direct way to repay their investment in him. For that reason alone, he felt obligated to accept her invitation to visit. Leo looked at him with concern. You don't owe them anything anymore, Sonny. There's no reason for you to go back there. What if they try to manipulate you again? After his adoption, Leo's new parents had educated him on the ways of the wealthy, and he knew how they operated. There were a million ways Sonny could have repaid his scholarship, but Mrs. Prescott had chosen the one that required him to sacrifice his future, his education, and 5 years of his life. It was, in Leo's opinion, a disgusting abuse of power. As it turned out, Leo's concerns were justified. After a few minutes of polite small talk, Mrs. Prescott steered the conversation toward Candy, subtly and not so subtly suggesting that he should give her another chance. Leo had been right. Candy's heartbreak had been her own doing, yet they had forced him, an innocent bystander, to be her savior, at the cost of his education, his career, and his freedom. And they had the audacity to call it an act of gratitude, expecting him to be thankful for the 5 years they had stolen from him. It was absurd. The truth was, he had never wanted to do it. If he had been allowed to finish his degree and go abroad, he could have paid back the scholarship, with interest within a few years of graduating. But Mrs. Prescott had been so desperate to spare her daughter any further pain that she had eagerly sacrificed him instead. Her daughter's life couldn't be derailed by a broken heart. But his life? His life had been expendable. Mrs. Prescott looked at the handsome, successful young man before her and felt a pang of regret. He would have made a fine son-in-law for the Prescott family. It was a shame that Candy had been so blinded by her obsession with Ethan that she had let him slip away. But now that was all in the past. It wasn't too late for him to come back. After listening to her proposal, Sonny said nothing. He simply placed a bank card on the table in front of her. The amount on this card is double what the Prescott family invested in my education. If not for our arrangement, I would have been able to pay you back in full, with interest, within 2 years of my graduation. The Prescott Group was known for its philanthropy. He wasn't the only student they sponsored. The funds were simply deposited into an account. They never asked for anything in return. He had just been naive enough to show up at their door and offer. He understood that now, but he no longer had the energy to dwell on it. He finished what he had to say and walked out, not waiting for her reaction. Mrs. Prescott was stunned, then felt a flash of anger, but the thought of the powerful foster family now backing him forced her to swallow her pride. Just as Sonny was leaving the Prescott estate, he ran into Candy, who was just arriving. "Sonny, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a mixture of surprise and hope. Sonny gave a short, harsh laugh. "Your mother was just suggesting that I throw away my career and future to come back and waste more of my life waiting on you, just like I did 7 years ago." The color drained from Candy's face as she remembered the terms of the contract she had read 2 years prior. For 5 years, he had been required to give up everything to be by her side. A normal person would have gone mad after a year or two of such a life, let alone 5. And considering how she had treated him during that time, she could only imagine how unbearable it must have been. A wave of guilt and pain washed over her. She clenched her fists and whispered, "I'm so sorry." But Sonny had no patience left for her apologies. He walked past her without a second glance. Perhaps his words had finally gotten through to her, because for the next few days, Candy left him alone. Sonny enjoyed the peace. A week later, the foster family hosted a large party, and as Leo's honorary younger brother, Sonny was, of course, in attendance. Throughout the party, Maya stuck close to his side, as if to protect him. Suddenly, a shrill voice cut through the chatter. "Sonny Miller, what are you doing here?" He turned to see Chloe Prescott charging toward him. Apparently, Mrs. Prescott couldn't bear to have her daughter suffer in Australia and had convinced her husband to bring her home. Seeing Sonny now, Chloe was filled with a renewed sense of resentment. This was all his fault. He had divorced her sister, and because of him, she had been exiled to Australia for 2 long years. Behind Sonny was another champagne tower. He instinctively tried to move out of the way, but his foot slipped on the edge of step. "Sonny!" Maya reacted instantly, pulling him back behind her just in time. Unable to stop her forward momentum, Chloe crashed headfirst into the champagne tower. The sound of shattering glass once again brought a party to a standstill as all eyes turned to see Chloe sprawled in the wreckage. Glass and blood were everywhere. "Chloe!" Candy cried, rushing to her sister's side. She tried to help her up, but Chloe cried out in pain at her touch. Maya quickly checked Sonny for any injuries. Seeing he was all right, she turned her icy gaze to Chloe on the floor. "What impeccable breeding," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Is this what the Prescotts call good manners? Attacking someone completely unprovoked. Did our Sonny do anything to provoke you? If I recall correctly, it was you and your little friends who pushed him into a champagne tower 2 years ago as well." At Maya's words, Candy's hand froze in midair. She looked past her to Sonny, her expression a mixture of guilt and pain. Sonny surveyed the wreckage, a deeply ironic expression on his face. Ignoring the whispers and stares of the other guests, Chloe's face flushed with humiliation. She scrambled to her feet and pointed an accusing finger at Sonny. "This is all your fault. If it weren't for you, my sister never would have sent me to Australia. With her family's connections, her time in Australia should have been a comfortable vacation." But Candy had been determined to teach her a lesson, cutting off her credit cards and freezing her accounts. Chloe had been forced to survive on the meager allowance her mother secretly sent her. "My fault," Sonny retorted, his voice dripping with ice. "You're the one who spent years looking down on me and mocking me. And who sent you to Australia? It wasn't me. You haven't thought this through, and now you're trying to blame me." He added, "Chloe, did you happen to leave your brain in Australia?" Realizing Sonny had just called her brainless, Chloe was about to fly into another rage. "That's enough," Candy snapped, turning a warning glare on her sister. "Haven't you had enough of Australia yet?" "Candy!" Chloe shrieked. "You're taking his side against me? What's so great about him? He's built like a beanpole, with no physique and no class. He's just an orphan." A sharp crack echoed through the room. Sonny had stepped forward and slapped Chloe across the face. "So what if I'm an orphan? At least I'm not a classless brat like you." He then turned his furious gaze on Candy. "Candy, get your family under control." Candy's hands clenched into fists. With a grim expression, she ordered her assistant, "Nathan, take my sister to the hospital." Nathan didn't hesitate, quickly clamping a hand over Chloe's mouth and dragging her from the room. "Sonny," Candy began, her face etched with guilt. "About today, I'm so sorry. I believe you're apologizing to the wrong person, Miss Prescott," Sonny said, his voice cold and distant. He looked over at Leo, who had just been summoned by the butler. "This is the foster family's party." Leo had already been briefed by the butler on his way over. He walked past Candy without a glance, though she had turned to apologize to him, and went straight to his wife and Sonny. Are you too hurt? When they both shook their heads, Leo finally turned his attention to Candy. My assistant will be in touch with you to discuss compensation for tonight's disturbance. With that, he had the butler escort Sonny and Maya upstairs to rest. The party, remarkably, was not ruined by the incident. It was late by the time Candy finished negotiating the damages with the Foster's butler and returned home. She was surprised to find every light in the Prescott mansion blazing. The housekeeper rushed to meet her at the door. Miss Prescott, please, you must talk to your father. Miss Chloe is still so young. As Candy walked into the main hall, she saw her sister kneeling on the floor, fresh red handprints marking her cheeks. On the sofa nearby, her mother was weeping quietly. Her father stood over Chloe, a belt in his hand, his face contorted with rage. It's clear you've been completely spoiled. Do you have any idea who you just assaulted? Who the Foster family is? How dare you? The Prescott Group's primary operations were international, so Mr. Prescott spent most of his time abroad, leaving domestic and family affairs in his wife's hands. He had only recently shifted his base of operations back to the States. After hearing the butler's report on his family's conduct over the past several years, he was seeing red. Since you clearly have no sense, you can go back to Australia and stay there for the rest of your life. Dad! Chloe shrieked from the floor. Candy rushed forward to intervene. Dad, she's still young. Young? She's in her 20s and still acts like a thoughtless child. And you, is there anything in that head of yours besides boys? Seeing her daughters being berated, Mrs. Prescott tried to interject. Darren, her husband turned on her, his fury unabated. And you, this is your fault. A doting mother makes for a spoiled child. The rage he felt upon hearing how his carefully raised daughter had gotten into 2 car accidents over a man and then spent years moping, came roaring back. They're both fools, and you've enabled them. Your daughter wants to die for some man? Let her. The Prescott legacy doesn't rest on her alone. Did you have to ruin 5 years of a young man's life for her drama? And your other daughter, she learns nothing of value, only how to be a cruel, disrespectful brat to her own family. What on earth have you been teaching them? Candy couldn't bear to hear her mother and sister being spoken to this way, but a single sharp glance from her father froze her in place. You and your sister, get to my study. I'll deal with you both in a minute. The vast living room was empty except for Mr. and Mrs. Prescott. He looked at his second wife, his eyes filled with disappointment. Before he had moved his operations abroad, he had left his most trusted assistant and butler behind to manage things in his absence. But they hadn't lasted a month. They had both flown overseas to join him, explaining that Mrs. Prescott had immediately fired them and replaced them with her own people. It was then, hearing from afar about Candy's accidents and her blatant disregard for her husband, that he realized his wife's indulgence had ruined his daughter. The Prescotts were known for being ruthless and decisive, for never letting emotion cloud their judgment, for always putting the family's interests first. A true Prescott would recover from any heartbreak on their own, not require a 5-year babysitter. And Chloe had become a tyrant, bullying her classmates, with her mother simply paying off the victims' families instead of disciplining her own child. This was why they had both felt entitled to torment Sonny for 5 years, with their mother turning a blind eye. I'll be staying in the country from now on, he said, his voice flat. Your health has been poor. You should go to the mountain estate to recuperate. With that one sentence, he had effectively banished her. Tears streamed down her face. Do you hate me so much? He looked at his wife, his expression unreadable. If I truly hated you, I would have served you with divorce papers the day I got back. Without waiting for her reply, he turned and walked toward his study. In the study, Candy and Chloe stood silently before their father. In their memories, he was a distant figure, always abroad on business. Their mother had been the one to raise them. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating. The clock on the wall ticked away the minutes before their father finally spoke, his face a grim mask. Chloe, you will return to Australia. I will have your passport confiscated. You are not to return to this country without my express permission. As for you, he said, looking at Candy, his eyes filled with profound disappointment. While you were chasing after a boy, did you even look at the company's quarterly reports? Effective immediately, your cousin will be taking over as CEO. You will start over, from an entry-level position. We will discuss your future with the company when you've proven you're capable. Both of your credit cards are frozen. My assistant will provide you with a $10,000 monthly allowance. Your company shares will be held in trust until you both demonstrate some maturity. With every word her father spoke, the color drained from Chloe's face. Candy remained silent, but her hands, hanging at her sides, were clenched into tight fists. News of a shake-up at the Prescott group spread like wildfire through their social circle. Maya recounted the gossip excitedly as she helped Sonny pack his suitcase. You've been back less than a month. Are you really going back to Italy already? Sonny placed the last folded shirt into his suitcase. I have to, he said. He had only come back for the exhibition. Now that it was over, it was time to leave. But Leo and Maya had family matters to attend to and had to stay behind for a while, promising to join him later. Besides, if he stayed, he was bound to run into Candy. Now that she was no longer CEO, she would have even more free time, and he simply didn't have the energy to deal with her. Sonny closed his suitcase and set it by the door. Maya came over, a curious look on her face. Do you remember Ethan? Sonny paused. Ethan? He hadn't heard the name in ages. The last he knew, Ethan had gone back to the States with his ex-wife. He hadn't bothered to keep up with what happened after that. Maya tapped on her phone and pulled up an American entertainment news site, holding it out for him to see. Ethan's been in an accident. He's paralyzed. Sonny's eyes widened. He read the article and learned that things had not gone well for Ethan after he returned to the States with his wife. Although Heather had protected him, her family had been openly hostile toward him. During a particularly nasty confrontation, a distraught Ethan had fallen down a flight of stairs. To make matters worse, tabloids had just published photos of Heather with another man. The combination of factors led to a final, explosive argument. The article didn't say what happened after that. Maya put her phone away. Because the Foster and Wallace families did business together, Ethan had learned of her connection to Sonny and had asked her to pass along an apology to him. Sonny listened in silence. He and Ethan should have been complete strangers. When he married Candy, Ethan was already married and living in another country. If Candy hadn't constantly been caught between the two of them, their lives would never have intersected. None of this would have happened. In the end, it was all Candy's fault. When his friends back home heard that Sonny was returning to Italy for good, they insisted on throwing him a farewell party. In the private room of the restaurant, bottle after bottle of wine was emptied. Still not ready for the night to end, the group decided to move on to a club. Not wanting to worry Maya, Sonny decided to call it a night. After saying his goodbyes, he was standing on the curb waiting for a cab when a car pulled up beside him and honked. Sonny, get in. He saw it was Candy and instinctively frowned and took a step back. But she just sat there, clearly not intending to move until he got in, and the cars behind her were starting to honk impatiently. Finally, with a sigh, Sonny got into the back seat. Candy offered a small smile and drove off. They didn't exchange a single word the entire way. When she pulled up in front of the Foster's house and killed the engine, he thanked her and reached for the door handle, but she stopped him. Sonny. His hand froze on the door handle. He looked at her, confused. Sonny, if there had been no contract, no Ethan, do you think we would have had a chance? Her voice was laced with a fragile hope. Sonny let out a short, humorless laugh. Given that you spend our entire marriage pining for another man, he said slowly, I'd say we were always destined to fail. She watched his cold, impassive face in the rearview mirror. And even without all that, we never would have worked. As a wife, you never made any effort to know me. You didn't know my food allergies, you didn't have my phone number, you never once thought to give me a gift. You never cared about me. You saw me as disposable. The only reason you're upset that I'm gone is because you're not used to being without someone who catered to your every whim. That isn't love. Then what is real love? She whispered. It's loyalty. It's sincerity. It's remembering the little things. It's choosing to be with someone and then removing anything that might threaten that bond. It's standing by my side, believing in me, defending me, and listening to my side of the story. It's communicating when there's a misunderstanding. It's choosing me, without hesitation, when things get tough. He paused. Which one of those things were you ever capable of doing? She was a princess, raised to be adored, who had never learned how to love someone in return. If she had understood any of it, she wouldn't have spent her own marriage chasing her married first love, secretly leaving him gifts and causing irreparable damage to his own marriage. Sonny didn't wait for her to respond. He continued, if it weren't for that contract, we never would have even met. I would have had my own life. Candy stared at him, a bitter taste filling her mouth. She opened her lips to speak, but no words came out. She could only watch in silence as he opened the door and got out of the car. Just as Sonny was about to walk through the gate, A pair of high beams blinded him, and he instinctively threw up a hand to shield his eyes. He heard the screech of tires and Candy's terrified scream. Sunny, the driver, was Chloe. Consumed by resentment and bitterness, she blamed Sunny for her downfall. In a moment of madness, she had overpowered her Minders, stolen a car, and aimed it directly at him. But at the last second, Candy had thrown herself out of the driver's seat and shoved him out of the way. He escaped with only minor scrapes. Candy, however, was not so lucky. Chloe's foot was still on the accelerator. The impact left Candy with both legs paralyzed, and she spent over a month in the ICU. Before the foster family could even press charges, Mr. Prescott had Chloe sent to prison with no release date in sight. During her long hospital stay, Sunny visited Candy once. After all, she had saved his life. Seeing her lying there, hooked up to a ventilator, he sighed heavily, his emotions a tangled mess. It seemed his words in the car that night had finally gotten through to her. But it was far, far too late. Her act of saving him was nothing more than a belated attempt at atonement. Sunny watched her for a long time before quietly leaving. Because of the accident, his plans to return to Italy were put on hold. He spent the next few months recovering at Leo's house. One morning, he heard that Candy had finally woken from her coma. When told that it was Chloe who had hit her and that she would never walk again, she reportedly had no reaction, remaining unervingly calm. Finally, the day came when Sunny began to pack his bags again. While clearing out a drawer, he found a ring. It was the one he had retrieved from the ocean all those years ago, the one Candy had used to propose to him. After 7 years of neglect, the diamond had fallen out and the band was tarnished and rusted. He turned it over and over in his hand. Perhaps this ring was the best answer to the question Candy had asked him in the car that night. For 5 years, their marriage had been a one-way street. He had given everything, and she had simply taken. Without mutual effort and care, their relationship had inevitably rusted and decayed, just like this ring. External factors aside, a marriage cannot survive on the efforts of one person alone. He placed the ring back in its box and had the butler deliver it to Candy. When she saw it, she stared at it for a long time, confused. She had never given Sunny a gift. The one ring she had bought for him, she had ended up giving to Ethan. A friend visiting her in the hospital saw the ring and gasped. "Isn't that the ring we threw into the ocean on the yacht that night?" Candy stared down at the tarnished metal, and the memory came flooding back. The bet. They had tied the ring to a fishing line and cast it into the sea, promising the Northwood property deed to whichever of them had a date brave enough to retrieve it. It was a silly, drunken game. But even with the line, none of the men had dared to jump into the churning water. None except Sunny. He had calmly asked the girl who proposed the bet if she was serious, and only after she had signed a legally binding transfer of the deed did he dive in without a moment's hesitation. She remembered watching his slender frame disappear beneath the waves, her own knuckles turning white as she gripped the railing. A panic unlike anything she had ever known had seized her, and for a wild moment, she had wanted to jump in after him. But then he had surfaced, the ring held triumphantly in his hand. She remembered clinging to him, her body shaking with a fear and another, nameless emotion. The fear that she had almost lost him. Only now did she understand what that nameless emotion had been. It was love. She had fallen in love with him in that moment. A wave of crushing, belated regret washed over her, and covering her face with her hands, she began to sob. The butler didn't return to the Fosters until late that night, and when he did, he was followed by a delivery truck. As Sunny stared in confusion at the mountain of packages, the butler explained that after receiving the ring, Miss Prescott had cried for a long time, then had a truckload of gifts sent over. They were, he said, compensation. Sunny stared at the pile for a long time before finally starting to open them. He soon discovered that she had sent a gift for every birthday he had ever had, from his 1st to his 18th, as well as gifts for every birthday, anniversary, and holiday they had missed during their 5 years of marriage. Every single item was something he would have loved. It was all information she could have gotten with a single phone call, information she was 7 years too late in acquiring. He set down the last gift and turned to the butler. Sell all of it. Donate the proceeds to the orphanage. His new departure date drew near. Not knowing when they would see him again, Leo and Maya cleared their schedules to spend his last few weeks with him, showing him all the sights of the city. They watched sunsets on the beach, rode to the top of the Ferris wheel, and ate everything from street food to gourmet desserts. It was the happiest Sunny had been in his entire life. "Eat up," Maya said, piling more food onto his plate. "You won't find anything this good once you leave." Even though they were sending a private chef and housekeeper with him, she knew it wouldn't be the same. Sunny just nodded obediently and ate every bite. On the day of his departure, as they were saying their goodbyes at the airport, he saw Candy for the first time since her accident. Unsure of her intentions, Leo and Maya instinctively moved to stand in front of him. Looking at the woman in the wheelchair, he felt a brief pang of pity. But she acted as if she didn't notice their hostility, offering him a small, sad smile. "Goodbye, Sunny." Back in Italy, Sunny didn't return to his old apartment. Instead, he moved into the beautiful villa Leo and Maya had purchased for him. The staff he had brought with him quickly settled in, and soon the house felt like a home. He spent the next week catching up with old friends and scouting locations for his next exhibition. It was a busy but happy time. Then, one evening, he received an unexpected phone call. It wasn't from Leo or Maya, but from Director Matthews. She was calling to tell him that Mrs. Prescott had passed away. The director didn't know the full, complicated history between him and the Prescott family. She only knew that Mrs. Prescott had been his benefactor and felt he should come back to pay his respects. In the end, he agreed. Arriving at the Prescott estate and seeing it draped in funeral wreaths, his heart grew heavy. She had, after all, changed the course of his life. It was the least he could do. In the memorial hall, he saw many other recipients of the Prescott Scholarship. They exchanged silent, knowing nods. Director Matthews had briefly explained the circumstances of her death over the phone. Her health had always been fragile, and after being sent to the mountain estate, she had declined rapidly. She had been kept in the dark about Chloe's imprisonment and Candy's paralysis. Then one day, on a whim, she had decided to call Chloe, who she believed was still just in Australia. When her daughter didn't answer, she had grown worried and questioned the staff. The staff had finally, hesitantly, told her the truth. The shock and grief had triggered a fatal heart attack. She had died instantly. Inside the hall, Sunny saw Mr. Prescott, his hair now completely white, and Candy, sitting in her wheelchair with a numb expression. He placed a chrysanthemum before Mrs. Prescott's portrait, bowed his head, and stood there for a long moment, lost in thought. His feelings for the woman were a complicated knot. He could not be grateful to the woman who had stolen 5 years of his life. But he could not hate the woman who had given him his education. But she was gone now. Whatever had passed between them was now just dust. He gave her portrait one last look, then walked over to Mr. Prescott and bowed his head slightly. "Sir, my deepest condolences." Mr. Prescott just nodded, his face grim. Sunny then moved to stand before Candy. He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "I'm sorry for your loss." Candy just gave a small, bitter smile, saying nothing. As it was the funeral of an immediate family member, Chloe had been granted a supervised release to attend. The time in prison had stripped her of all her former arrogance. She just looked numb. She didn't even seem to register Candy's presence. It wasn't until her eyes fell on her mother's portrait that she collapsed to the floor, a raw, animalistic wail tearing from her throat. "Mom!" The other mourners turned away, unable to watch. On the day of the burial, a light rain began to fall. Representatives from all the major families were in attendance. It was there that Leo and Maya, having just arrived, discovered that Sunny had secretly returned. They didn't question him, but he explained his reasons anyway. Maya pulled him into a hug. "If we thought for a second you were here against your will, we would have handled it." At the cemetery, Maya and Sunny stood together under a single umbrella, watching as the coffin was slowly lowered into the earth. Nearby, Chloe was sobbing so violently she looked as if she might collapse, held up only by the 2 prison guards flanking her. After the service, the mourners began to disperse. Sunny and Maya were among the last to leave, quietly discussing his travel plans. "Sunny," Candy's voice called out from behind them. He turned to see her sitting in the rain, watching him. "Could you walk with me for a moment?" Maya looked at him with concern, ready to make his excuses for him at the slightest sign of discomfort. Sunny tightened his grip on the umbrella, then relaxed it. The rain was falling harder now. He walked over to her, holding the umbrella over her head as the Prescott's butler, who had just arrived with another umbrella, began to push her wheelchair toward the cemetery gates. "Sunny, I don't have a family anymore." The butler stopped pushing the wheelchair. Sunny stopped walking as well. Her mother was dead. Her sister was in prison. She was paralyzed, and her father, now focused on grooming a new heir, was a stranger who had been the first to leave the funeral. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, realizing she had nothing to say. What was there to say? This silent distance was, after all, how they had always been. The thought brought a bitter laugh to her lips. If only we could do it all over again, she whispered. She would have loved him properly, protected him. They wouldn't have ended up like this. She wouldn't be facing a future alone. But there were no second chances. Candy. The rain muffled all other sounds, and his voice came through with a startling clarity. There are no do-overs in life. We can only move forward. Both of them. They could only move forward. There would be no starting over for them. It was the 3rd year since their divorce, and it was the first time they had ever spoken to each other with such calm. Let's just part ways amicably. He had said the same thing to her when they first met again, but back then, she had been so consumed with getting him back that she hadn't truly heard the finality in his words. The rain suddenly stopped. He closed the umbrella and started walking toward the gate. It's better if we don't see each other again. His back grew smaller and smaller, until he finally disappeared from her view. Okay, goodbye, Sonny.